All right, let's picture this. It's 1986, Saturday morning. Sunlight is sneaking through those worn-out curtains, casting that strange golden glow over the carpet. You're in pajamas. The house, silent. Parents totally knocked out. It's just you, the scratchy carpet, and that warm TV glow. Right in front of you, a bowl of cereal that's practically just sugar disguised as breakfast floating in milk. Maybe it's Fruit Loops, maybe Lucky Charms, or if you were feeling wild, Nintendo cereal system, with Mario and Link duking it out for your attention. You turn on the TV, one of those ancient wood-paneled monsters that buzzed like crazy as it powered up. Twist the dial, hit that sweet static crackle, and then bam, a wild burst of rainbow cartoons lights up the screen. Honestly, this wasn't just something to do, it was a ritual, like church, only way brighter and with way more Ninja Turtles. Those Saturday mornings were like Christmas on loop. No school, no parents bugging you, no chores, just your own sacred block of cartoons, all for you. 4 hours of pure, unfiltered joy. The rest of the world, Cold War freakouts, grown-up problems, whatever, didn't exist until after 11. But here's the truth. Those cartoons, not all sweetness and light. So yeah, let's dig into what made those shows so magical and why, after all these years, we still can't stop talking about them. Let's just say it, the 80s cartoon craze was straight up corporate wish fulfillment. No use pretending it wasn't. Anyone who's paid even a little attention knows what was going on. But honestly, the sheer scale of it is kind of mind-blowing if you really think about it. So imagine this, early 80s, Reagan in the White House, and suddenly the FCC goes, let's ease up on those annoying rules about children's programming. Before that, they actually had some principles. You couldn't bombard kids with ads in the middle of their cartoons. Shows couldn't just be extended toy commercials. Wild idea, right? Then just like that, deregulation hits. The restrictions disappear overnight. Toy companies and animation studios are basically throwing parties in their offices. Now Saturday mornings are just 22-minute infomercials for whatever new chunk of plastic they want to sell. That's precisely what happened. Let's be honest, every classic you remember, G.I. Joe, Transformers, My Little Pony, take your pick. Every single one was just selling toys with a catchy jingle. Didn't matter how clever the stories got or how many group hugs the Care Bears pulled off. If the main character showed up on your lunchbox, you were watching a commercial. That's the reality, and truthfully, it worked. No shame, I was right there with my allowance, desperate to get every neon playset in sight. Give me Castle Grayskull, honestly. But here's where all the suspicion kind of misses the point. As a kid, none of that mattered. I wasn't thinking, wow, Hasbro's profits must be soaring. I was totally absorbed. Laser shootouts, rainbow ponies, mutant turtles fighting crime underground. It felt like magic, not a marketing ploy. And that's what all the cranky adults always seem to forget. Honestly, the whole reason these shows blew up into these huge, wild universes is because they needed to sell toys. You couldn't just have one hero, one villain, and call it done. Nope, that wasn't going to pay the bills. They needed armies, dozens of heroes, squads of baddies, water bikes, jets, some weird drilling vehicle. If you could play with it, they shoved it in. Secret bases, strange hideouts, animal sidekicks, the whole package. And that's how you got the toyetic universe. Catchy, right? G.I. Joe was the master of this. That show's cast, absolutely wild. Every single one looked and sounded totally unique. That's what made it so dang immersive. It pulled you right in. I remember obsessing over those card backs on my action figures, checking off every name like it was some epic quest. Then, turn on the TV, they were there, alive, well, sort of. That moment you saw a character on the screen and realized you had him in your toy bin, pure magic. Or that desperate feeling, I need that guy to finish my team. It totally blurred the line between watching and playing. He-Man wasn't just a cartoon. I was living in that world. I could replay Skeletor getting wrecked or switch it up and let him win for once. It felt real, tangible, like my living room was Eternia. And don't get me started on the crazy mashups that showed up because toy companies were chasing the next big thing. Mask? Basically, let's mash up Transformers and G.I. Joe and see what happens. Brilliant. Dino Riders? We're putting lasers on dinosaurs and nobody can stop us. Completely bonkers, but in the best way possible. So yeah, maybe corporate greed started it all, but what came out of it? Some of the wildest, most creative world building ever. All just to sell a bunch of plastic. Honestly, not a bad deal. People like to look back on these cartoons and think they were just silly, harmless entertainment. Like, sure, laugh at the clunky animation or the lines that sound like they were written by someone who'd never spent time with a real kid, but honestly, a bunch of those shows went completely off the deep end in ways that had no business showing up at 8 a.m. while you're wolfing down Fruit Loops. Beneath all that neon and corny music, there was genuine nightmare material, sorcery, body-snatching creeps, villains who still pop up in my dreams every now and then. Take He-Man, for instance. On the outside, it's this blindingly bright muscle parade, right? By the power of Grayskull, that line was iconic. The transformation sequence was so ridiculous, you could practically feel your young brain frying. But Eternia? That world was a fever dream. It wasn't some cozy fantasy land. It was a monster pit. Skeletor gets turned into a meme these days, but back then, the dude was a living skeleton with a voice like he gargled gravel. And his plans? Not just, oh, I'll steal the magic rock. We're talking mass mind control, evil ceremonies, entire villages basically on the verge of being wiped out. My friend's mom banned He-Man from their house after seeing Skeletor once. One look at that yellow skull face and bam, straight to, that's devil business, not under my roof. And Thundercats, that wasn't just action. Sometimes it was pure horror. First episode, planet explodes, everyone's a refugee, welcome to Trauma Central. Mum-Ra, I still get shivers thinking about him. His transformation was full-on body horror for kids. He'd rip off his own bandages and morph from a dried-up mummy into this screaming ripped corpse with glowing red eyes. Mum-Ra, the ever-living. Seriously, that is not bedtime stuff. The show kept piling on ancient curses, space cults, and mummified monsters like it was no big deal. Saturday morning, but with ancient nightmares. Then you had Voltron. Everyone remembers the robot lions, the big robot coming together, yeah, classic toy ad. But the stories, those went full disaster movie. Entire planets getting invaded, cities destroyed, people actually fleeing for their lives. It wasn't just blow up the bad guy. Even critics pointed out the endless destruction. Theater and trauma was the phrase. The stakes felt enormous. Suddenly, you're not just cheering for the heroes to win a fight, you're hoping they literally prevent the end of the world. No big deal, right? And if you were really into it, the hardcore Saturday morning crew, you watched Robotech. That show did not care about your feelings. It mashed together 3 different anime and just went all in on the emotion. People died, main characters got killed off, Rick Hunter, the hero, didn't always get a happy ending. The show actually tackled grief, war, PTSD, stuff that in hindsight makes you wonder, how did this even get on TV? It wasn't, ha, you're caught. It was, guess what, war is brutal and your friends might not survive. Kids' cartoons, huh? Wild times. Now let's get into this whole anime connection thing. The truth is, a huge chunk of the magic in 80s cartoons actually came from Japan, even though we had no idea as kids. You'd be on the couch, munching on sugary cereal, watching Thundercats or Silverhawks, totally clueless that you were basically watching Japanese art dressed up as Saturday morning cartoons. Studios like Topcraft and Toei weren't just making cartoons, they were showing off. Think about the upgrade. Compared to the stiff, recycled animation from the 70s, these shows just exploded off the screen. The camera started moving, you got crazy angles, real-looking explosion, and mechs that made you want to build entire armies out of Legos just to keep up. Still, people used to argue, and let's be honest, they still do, about what makes a real action cartoon. Filmation was doing its own thing. He-Man, She-Ra, Ghostbusters, you'd see the same punch, the same boulder toss again and again. He-Man was usually just wrestling with Beastman instead of having actual fights. It was action, but kind of the light version, missing the heat. Then there was the so-called hardcore stuff. Some fans will always say G.I. Joe was the real deal because, hey, people were actually throwing punches. There were tanks, jets, proper dogfights. It was military fantasy for kids who thought camo was like the coolest thing ever. And over on the sidelines, you had those strange, overlooked gems like Galaxy Rangers. That theme song, No Guts, No Glory, tell me that doesn't sound like it should be blasting during a montage where someone saves the world with a guitar. It was cowboys in space, but the show never talked down to you. The animation was fluid, the stories had bite, and you could feel the sweat and ink in every scene. None of that clean digital stuff that came after. It was gritty, real, and honestly, that's what made it stick with you. What I really miss from that time is just how wild the writers got with mixing genres. Seriously, there was no restraint. They just smashed together whatever bizarre ideas came to mind. No algorithm or marketing exec hovering over them, telling them to pick a single genre. Now it seems like every show comes pre-packaged with a label from some streaming platform. This is your comedy, this is your action. Don't even think about mixing them. But in the 80s, pure chaos, the best kind. Take Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Who thinks of that? 4 mutant turtles raised by a rat, talking like surfers, fighting criminals, obsessed with pizza. It started off as a gritty comic satire. It shouldn't have worked, right? But it blew up. People loved it because it went all in on being totally nuts. Or Silverhawks. I bet the pitch was, let's make Thundercats, but in space. They're basically robot birds of prey, and the villain is an alien mob boss who rides a giant flying squid. That's not just outside the box. That's in another galaxy. In Humanoids, that was straight Lovecraftian horror for kids. Gigantic monsters crawling out from the underworld. But how did that ever get approved for Saturday morning TV? Brilliant move. And Thundar the Barbarian, that show mashed up Conan-style sword fights, Star Wars-level technology, and threw it all into a post-apocalyptic setting. A glorious pileup. It really felt like every writer was living out a pop culture fever dream and no one told them to dial it back. They borrowed from comics, sci-fi, martial arts movies, fantasy books, anything. Swords in space, robot stallions, laser weapons, and ancient ruins. Genre, who cared? Everything just got mixed together, and honestly, it taught us that the rules are there to be broken. Why not stick a cowboy on a robot unicorn and set him loose in a ruined future? Back then, the answer was always, absolutely, go for it. During the 80s, everything was dialed up to the max. MTV was blasting from every living room, people rocked neon spandex like it was everyday wear, and everyone was wild about stuff, just collecting things left and right. Cartoons, they soaked all that in and cranked it back out with even more edge. Now, about the music. Honestly, the music was a world of its own. Shuki Levy, Haim Saban, those guys weren't just dropping in a few bleeps and bloops and calling it good. Nope, they went all out. Listen to the DuckTales theme or the Ninja Turtles intro and try not to grin like crazy. I dare you. Those tracks go hard. They're pop bangers in disguise, sneaking into Saturday morning TV like it's nothing. And don't even get me started on Transformers. Some of those synth solos could easily outshine half the top 40 from that era. The background tracks made every scene feel epic, like you'd hear them and suddenly everything was high stakes, robots on the line. And then He-Man hit that transformation anthem, pure adrenaline. These shows didn't just fill our screens, they straight up set the dress code, made you want to dye your hair electric pink and pick up a guitar. Everything had that new wave flair. And then Miami Vice barreled in, painting the world in pastel, pinks, teals, you name it. And honestly, that vibe never really faded. People are still chasing it with all the retro revival hype, denim jackets, throwback shades, trying to look like they walked out of a cartoon. Why? Because that look is pure confidence. That's peak pop culture swagger, no question. Honestly, thinking back now as an adult, what cracks me up most is just how crazy those old shows were with our emotions. It was whiplash, seriously. One minute you're watching robots beat each other up like it's the end of the world, and the next, the show's desperately trying to keep some angry parents group happy. Transformers? Oh man, don't even get me started on the Transformers the movie from '86. If you made it through seeing Optimus Prime die and didn't need a hug afterward, maybe you were a robot too. I remember that scene, him just lying there, gray and lifeless. Total gut punch. I didn't know a cartoon could hit that hard. And then bam, episode's done, and suddenly everyone's talking about friendship or something. You'd just seen G.I. Joe blow up half the planet, lasers flying, Cobra Commander losing his mind, and then out of nowhere, everyone's hanging out in a park, telling kids not to play on frozen ponds. Those little moments, they just stuck with us. Let's talk about this whole simpler times thing, okay? People love to toss that phrase around like we were all living in black and white, eating Wonder Bread, and pretending the Cold War didn't exist or something. But honestly, when I say simpler, I'm not thinking about politics or money. I mean the content drought back then. TV shows weren't a flood, they were a trickle. Every generation has their own back in my day story, but seriously, for those of us who grew up before the internet took over our attention spans, those shows were absolute gold. No YouTube wormholes, no Netflix dropping whole seasons at once. Binge watching didn't exist. You actually had to drag yourself out of bed on a Saturday morning if you wanted to catch Spider-Man and his amazing friends. Miss it? Too bad. Maybe you'd catch it again in 6 months, if you were lucky. That made every episode feel epic. Scarcity just dialed up the excitement. And here's the thing, we basically had our own underground network of schoolyard info. Couldn't just Google who the new Thundercat was. Nope, you had to rely on some kid who claimed his cousin's friend knew something. Or maybe you saw a strange new toy at a mart and wondered if it meant a new villain was on the way. The playground was like a rumor stock market. Finding another kid who also watched Silverhawks or Bravestar, instant friendship. So when I throw on an episode of Gem or Thundercats today, it's not just nostalgia. It's like opening a memory vault from a time when my biggest worry was if my Game Boy batteries would survive the weekend, or if I could convince my mom to buy me that one ridiculous action figure. Honestly, it's pure joy. 80s cartoons were just their own wild, glorious thing. Let's be real, the animation, sometimes it looked like someone was drawing during a bumpy bus ride. And the writing wasn't exactly Shakespeare. Nobody was quoting these shows in English class. But man, they had guts. These shows were basically toy ads with wild ambitions, and yet they gave us these huge, unforgettable worlds. Somehow they turned a marketing scheme into legit legends that still get talked about. Honestly, I think what makes those cartoons stick is how boldly weird and vibrant they were. They were kind of a mess, sure, but they were ours. It felt like this secret code for our whole generation. Sometimes you just need to hear the Thundercats yell and remember when life was just lasers, wild hair, and sugar rushes.